What happens when a war aimed at one country suddenly explodes inside another? And what if that mistake doesn't just cause outrage but forces an entire NATO frontier to wake up faster than Russia expected? If you like clear breakdowns that go deeper than the headline, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with one person who always wants the real story, not just the loud story. For a long time, Russia has used drones as more than simple weapons. They are tools of pressure. They are cheap, hard to stop perfectly, and psychologically effective. They keep people awake. They stretch air defenses. They force leaders into ugly choices. Every launch carries more than explosives. It carries tension. But pressure has a weakness. Sometimes it slips. Sometimes a weapon sent toward one target ends up somewhere it was never supposed to be. And when that place is a NATO country, the meaning of the strike changes instantly. A Russian drone launched during a wider attack on southern Ukraine reportedly crossed into Romanian airspace and hit where civilians could be harmed. Romania was not reacting to a first shock. It was reacting to a pattern, because an accident can be explained once, maybe twice. But when the same kind of violation keeps happening again and again, it stops feeling like a random mistake and starts feeling like a test of patience, a test of sovereignty, a test of how much a NATO member will absorb before it decides that enough really means enough. And Romania reached that point, not with panic, not with empty speeches, but with a response that was focused, strategic, and deeply revealing. The visible story was about a drone crossing a border. The real story was about what that crossing exposed. It exposed how fragile the line between Ukraine's battlefield and NATO territory has become. It exposed how important Romania now is in the Black Sea, and it exposed something Moscow may not have expected clearly enough. Romania is no longer just a quiet country on the edge of the alliance. It is becoming one of the key anchors of NATO's southeastern front. That matters because while much of the world kept its eyes on the front lines inside Ukraine, Romania was changing. Quietly, steadily, and with growing urgency, it was modernizing its military, tightening its defenses, expanding its strategic role, and becoming more central to the wider security picture around the Black Sea. So when that drone crossed into Romanian airspace, it did not hit a random border state, it hit the wrong target. Not because Romania wants a bigger war, not because Bucharest is trying to perform strength for cameras, but because Russia's low-cost pressure tactic may have collided with a country that now has both the reason and the ability to harden an entire region against future threats. To understand why the reaction was so strong, you have to go back to that night. Russia launched a wave of drones toward southern Ukraine. The attack focused on the port zone near the Danube, especially the areas directly across from Romania. That geography is not a footnote, it is the heart of the danger. The Danube in this war is not just a river, it is a line between a battlefield and an alliance border, between Ukrainian survival routes and NATO territory, between a war that is supposed to stay contained and a war that keeps brushing against Europe's red lines. As the drones moved in, Ukrainian air defenses were already trying to stop them. Some were intercepted, but at least one drone reportedly broke from its expected route and entered Romanian airspace. Romanian radar tracked it. Fighter jets were scrambled. A military helicopter was launched. The military had authorization to engage if needed. That is important because it shows Romania was not passive. It was alert. The problem was speed. The drone was flying low. The time window was tiny. It reportedly remained in Romanian airspace for only a few minutes before impact. In theory, a few minutes sounds manageable. In real military conditions, especially against a small, low-flying target near a populated area, those minutes vanish fast. And this is the painful part for Romania. The response was not blocked by hesitation. It was blocked by reality. The aircraft could not safely get into position quickly enough. Engaging above a civilian area also creates its own risk. If you destroy a drone over homes, the falling debris and explosion can still injure the people you are trying to protect. So the worst kind of gap appeared, the gap between detection and usable action. Then came the detail that made the picture even more disturbing. The same night, reports tied another unmanned vehicle to Romanian territory in a different region. That meant the event no longer looked like one bizarre deviation. It felt like a pattern surfacing again, only this time with even sharper consequences. That is when Romania's reaction started to make complete sense. Bucharest did not treat the incident like a media problem. It treated it like a strategic message. The first message was diplomatic, but it was not symbolic in the shallow sense. Romania moved against Russia's diplomatic presence connected to Constanța. A Russian consul was declared unwelcome, and the Russian consulate there was shut down. That might sound like standard statecraft. It was not. The location gives the move real weight. Constanța is Romania's biggest port. It is tied to Black Sea logistics, NATO activity, and the wider system that helps keep Ukraine supplied and connected. A Russian diplomatic presence there is not just ceremonial. It can observe patterns, monitor movement, study timing, and gather awareness around a highly sensitive corridor. So when Romania closed that door, it was doing more than making a statement. It was cutting visibility. That is why many saw the move as Romania blinding one of Moscow's eyes on the Black Sea. And that is where the irony becomes brutal for the Kremlin. Russia used a relatively cheap drone tactic to create pressure. Romania answered with a step that may have reduced Russian awareness in one of the most important operational zones in the region. A low-cost threat triggered a potentially high-cost intelligence setback. That is what happens when you hit the wrong target. But the diplomatic answer was only the first layer. The second layer was military, and that is where the stakes rise even higher. Romania's leaders began speaking in terms NATO pays close attention to: territorial integrity, security threat, allied consultation, reinforced defense. In plain English, Romania was signaling that this was not just an unfortunate border accident. It was the kind of incident that can force alliance-level attention. This is where many people immediately think of Article 5, the famous collective defense clause. But real escalation usually climbs step by step. One of the most serious steps before that is Article 4, the consultation mechanism. That process allows a NATO member to call formal talks when it believes its territory or security is under threat. Why is that important? Because once an incident enters that level of discussion, it stops being a local problem. It becomes an alliance problem. Every allied capital watches more closely. Every military planner updates risk assumptions. Every repeated accident becomes harder to dismiss. Romania had not crossed into open war language, but the fact that its officials openly treated the incident as strong ground for deeper NATO consultation showed how much patience had already burned away. NATO's eastern flank depends on credibility. Credibility is not just missiles and aircraft. It is the belief that repeated violations will trigger rising consequences. That is exactly why drone warfare is so dangerous here. A drone can be tactically limited while still creating strategic stress. It forces ugly decisions. Do you shoot it down and risk debris falling into a town? Do you wait and risk impact? Do you call it accidental and invite more of the same? Or do you respond too hard and risk wider escalation? It is a trap built from ambiguity, and Romania seems to have decided that ambiguity now serves Russia more than anyone else. So instead of arguing only about intent, Romania appears to be focusing on effect. That distinction is everything. Moscow can always say a drone drifted. It can blame route error, battlefield chaos, navigation failure, or interference. But from Romania's point of view, the effect is what matters. The effect is violated airspace. The effect is damaged property. The effect is frightened civilians. The effect is a population being told, again and again, that war is still over there while debris keeps proving otherwise. And when effects repeat often enough, intent stops working as a shield. If this breakdown is helping you see the bigger picture, hit subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who thinks Black Sea security is just a side issue. It isn't. It may be one of the most important pressure points in Europe right now. Once you see that, Romania's military transformation becomes the real center of the story. A lot of people still think about Romania through an old mental map of Europe. Peripheral, useful but not central, important but secondary. That image is fading fast. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Romania faced a harsh reality. It had a long border with Ukraine. It had Black Sea access. It had ports, routes, and military sites that could become crucial in any wider crisis. But it also had modernization gaps that made this geography uncomfortable. That is a dangerous combination. It means your location gives you strategic importance faster than your military gives you confidence. So Romania started changing the equation. One visible part of that change came in the air. Older Soviet-era systems were pushed out, and newer aircraft became part of a very different future. That does not mean fighter jets solve every problem. They do not. The drone incident itself showed their limits against low, fast, short-window incursions. But fighters still matter because they symbolize something larger. Romania is no longer content to rely on outdated tools in a high-risk neighborhood. Modernization is not only technical, it is psychological. It tells allies that you are serious. It tells adversaries that you are harder to intimidate. And it tells your own public that the state understands the danger. Below the fighter level, Romania has also been moving toward layered air defense. That phrase can sound cold and technical until you translate it into real life. It means not asking one system to solve every threat. It means high-altitude threats are handled one way, medium-range threats another, and low-flying drones another way again. In theory, that is how you close the exact kind of gap the drone incident exposed. Because a fighter jet may be powerful, but it is not the perfect answer to a low-altitude drone that appears with little warning near homes. For that, you need faster local detection, shorter-range defenses, cheaper interception options, and clearer rules for immediate action. That last part matters more than many people realize. Wars do not only expose hardware gaps, they expose decision gaps. Who can authorize a shoot-down, under what conditions, over what type of area, against what kind of threat? How quickly can that decision move from radar screen to actual interception? Romania, like other states near this war, has had to adapt in real time. Laws, rules of engagement, posture, and coordination all become part of national defense. A country can buy advanced systems, but if it does not settle how they are used in seconds of crisis, the gap remains. So when people say Romania is arming itself, that is only half the truth. Romania is also learning. It is turning pressure into doctrine, and that is a major problem for Russia, because repeated low-level violations can create two opposite outcomes. They can scare a country into caution, or they can train that country into readiness. They can expose weakness, or they can accelerate repair. If Romania had reacted with confusion and delay, Moscow might have gained something. But if Romania reacts by modernizing faster, coordinating more deeply with NATO, and removing ambiguity from future responses, then every similar incident starts working against Russia. That is why this drone strike may matter far beyond the damage it caused. It may become one of those moments that suddenly clarifies priorities. Once that happens, budgets move faster, systems arrive faster, military exercises feel more urgent, and allies stop treating risk as a theory. Now bring geography back into the story, because geography is the silent force behind almost everything here. Romania sits on the Black Sea. That alone gives it weight. But this is not just any coastline. It faces a zone where Russia has tried to project power, pressure shipping, and defend its wider regional position. It also sits beside routes that matter to Ukraine's survival and Europe's strategic balance. Then there is Constanța. In wartime, a port is not just a commercial site, it is a breathing point. It helps move goods, support, equipment, and resilience. A country that helps keep such a node functioning becomes far more important than many outsiders realize. Then there are the military sites inside Romania. NATO infrastructure there is not abstract. Missile defense, air operations, logistics, allied troops, and future expansion all raise Romania's strategic profile. In plain terms, Romania is not just near the war, it is near the systems that shape the wider balance around the war. So when a Russian drone lands there, even by mistake, it lands in a place loaded with strategic meaning. That is what makes the Kremlin's usual defense weaker over time. Yes, in technical terms, drones can drift. Yes, war near borders creates spillover risk. Yes, interference and route failure are real. All of that may be true, but repetition changes everything. One time can be error. 28 times starts to look like indifference at best and coercive carelessness at worst. And for the country living under that pattern, the difference eventually stops mattering. Because whether the intrusion is deliberate or merely tolerated, the burden falls on the same people. A family hears another alert. A pilot scrambles again. A local commander gets seconds to choose between danger in the sky and danger on the ground. A government has to explain why sovereignty keeps looking porous. An alliance has to explain why its borders are being tested piece by piece. That is the power of gray zone pressure. It lives in the space between outrage and formal war. But gray zone tactics also have a weakness. They only work if the target stays uncertain, cautious, and divided. Romania is looking less and less like that kind of target. What makes this even more striking is that Romania's answer is not only defensive, it is structural. The country is preparing for a future in which drones, maritime tension, logistics pressure, intelligence rivalry, and regional instability all overlap. That means the Black Sea is no longer a side theater in the minds of planners. It is becoming a pressure chamber. And if Romania becomes one of the states helping lock that chamber down, Russia's room to maneuver shrinks. Think about the timeline. A drone can cross a border in minutes, but the consequences of that crossing can shape years. A brief incursion can justify stronger laws, faster procurement, tighter allied coordination, and long-term changes in military posture. A cheap weapon can trigger expensive strategic blowback. That is where the emotional center of this story really sits. Behind the hardware and the diplomacy is a simple human truth. People can live next to danger for a long time by telling themselves it is still across the river, across the line, across the map. But when danger lands on your side, something changes. Distance collapses, abstraction dies. The war next door becomes the impact here. That shift is politically powerful. It creates unity that speeches rarely can. It also explains why Romania's reaction felt so sharp. This was not just a technical security event. It was a moment when repeated humiliation stopped being normal. And that is dangerous for Russia, because normalization is one of the hidden advantages of pressure tactics. The moment a country refuses to normalize repeated violations, the cost curve changes. Now we have to face the hardest question. Did Russia intend to hit Romania? Based on the wider logic of incidents like this, the most careful answer is probably no. A deliberate strike on a NATO country would be a massive escalation, and Moscow understands those risks. Even some Romanian security voices have framed these intrusions as the effects of a nearby war, not proof of a planned direct attack on NATO. But that does not rescue Russia from the strategic damage, because states are judged not only by what they intend, but by what they repeatedly cause. If your methods keep sending explosive systems into Allied airspace, keep scaring civilians, keep damaging property, and keep forcing NATO members into crisis posture, then your claimed intent matters less each time. Eventually, the region stops asking, "Did you mean it?" and starts asking, "Why should we tolerate this any longer?" That question is far more dangerous for Moscow. It leads to harsher diplomatic restrictions, tighter intelligence scrutiny, stronger defenses, and a firmer argument for more Allied support. Even if the strike was unintended, it can still help produce the exact outcome Russia should want to avoid: a better armed, more alert, more coordinated Black Sea frontier. There is another layer too: cost. For Russia, drones are attractive partly because of economics. They are relatively cheap compared with the interceptors used against them. That creates a cruel imbalance. You spend modestly to force your enemy to spend heavily. But Romania's direction suggests the region is looking for ways to reverse that equation. More drone hunting systems, more localized defense, more layered coverage, more domestic cooperation. Once that matures, the cheap drone advantage starts to shrink. So if Russia hoped to exploit low-cost pressure, incidents like this may actually accelerate the building of the very anti-drone architecture that limits that advantage. Again, wrong target, because Romania is not responding like a country scared into silence. It is responding like a country given proof that the southeastern flank cannot rely on assumptions. Proof that low-altitude drone defense is no longer optional. Proof that diplomatic patience has limits. Proof that Black Sea security and Ukraine's survival are deeply connected. And proof that what looks like a tactical spillover can become a strategic turning point. That is also why Allied reactions matter. When NATO officials repeat that every inch of alliance territory will be defended, they are not only reassuring Romania, they are shaping Moscow's future calculations. They are saying the space for plausible deniability is shrinking. The same goes for Europe more broadly. Diplomatic support, sanctions pressure, and accelerated defense backing all send the same message. A cheap drone may be small, but the political shockwave around it can be very large. That is the part many people miss. The size of the weapon does not determine the size of the consequence. Location does, timing does, pattern does, context does, and in this case, all of them pointed in the same direction. A NATO member on the Black Sea, a region already tense, a repeated pattern of violations, a civilian impact that shattered the illusion of safe distance. That combination turns even a brief incursion into something much heavier. And that is why Romania's response may echo beyond its own borders. Other frontline states are watching. They are learning from the legal choices, the diplomatic speed, the military gaps exposed, and the alliance messaging that followed. In that sense, Romania is not just reacting for itself. It is becoming a case study for what Europe's next border defense model may look like: faster detection, cheaper interception, less ambiguity, harsher penalties for repeated violations, and far less patience for the excuse that everything is just an accident. If that becomes the norm, Russia's room for gray zone pressure narrows across the wider flank. So what does Putin lose here, beyond one drone and a bad news cycle? Possibly much more. He loses diplomatic space, because denial sounds weaker when the other side presents clearer evidence and clearer resolve. He loses intelligence comfort, because every Russian presence near sensitive infrastructure comes under sharper scrutiny after incidents like this. He loses strategic ambiguity, because each new violation builds the case for deeper NATO involvement. He loses cost advantage over time because repeated drone pressure speeds up the search for cheaper counters. And he may lose freedom in the Black Sea because Romania is becoming harder, not softer. That is a terrible exchange. A tactic designed to intimidate ends up motivating. A method designed to blur lines ends up sharpening them. Wars are not shaped only by battles on the main front. They are also shaped by secondary effects that wake up new actors, trigger new investments, and redraw the map of danger in people's minds. Sometimes the most important result of an attack is not what it destroys, it is who it changes. And Romania may be changing in front of us, not into a reckless state, not into a state chasing escalation, but into a state that now understands with total clarity that geography will not protect it from the war's consequences, and that only readiness might. Once a country reaches that realization, there is no easy path back to old complacency. The next time a drone approaches Romanian airspace, the response may be faster, the law may be clearer, the technology may be better placed, the alliance may be better prepared, and Russia may discover that the same tactic no longer produces anxiety, but interception. If you've stayed with me this far, you already know this story is bigger than one explosion. So take 2 seconds to like the video, subscribe for the next deep dive, and share it with someone who still thinks the most important turning points in war only happen on the main battlefield. Because this moment matters. One drone did more than cross a border. It exposed a new reality in the Black Sea. It showed that Romania is no longer just watching the war, it is being pulled into the edge of it and responding by hardening that edge. And if that hardening continues, then Russian surveillance, Black Sea leverage, and Moscow's ability to pressure the region all face a colder, more disciplined barrier. So yes, a drone missed. But the bigger miss may have been strategic. The Kremlin reached for another night of pressure and may have helped create a tougher NATO frontier instead. It tried to frighten a border state and may have strengthened a Black Sea anchor. It tried to export instability and may have accelerated the military transformation that will make future spillover harder. That is the risk of careless power. Eventually, one mistake lands on the wrong country, at the wrong moment, in the wrong place. And from that point on, the balance starts to move. So the next time someone says it was just one drone, remember this: history often turns through events that look small at first. A few minutes in the sky, a few kilometers off course. One impact where there should have been none. And suddenly a nation closes ranks, an alliance sharpens its posture, a region rethinks its defenses, and an aggressor learns that even a cheap tactic can trigger a very expensive future. That is why this was not just another border incident. It was a warning shot in reverse, not fired by Romania, but answered by Romania. And the answer was clear: the Black Sea is getting harder, Romania is getting sharper, and if Moscow keeps using the same tactic, it may keep teaching its neighbors exactly how to stop it.